Did you know our next Spa Business Bootcamp is happening November 1st through 5th? If you're a spa owner who's ready to step out of the chaos of running your business and move into the role of spa CEO, this training is for you. The best part is, it's totally free. Get registered today by clicking the link below this episode or by heading over to Instagram and clicking the link in our bio. Can't wait to see you there. Hello, my dears. Daniela here, and welcome to another episode of the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. You know, one of the coolest things about having a podcast is the doors that it opens to have conversations with some really incredible, really interesting people. On this podcast in the past, we launched it in April 2018. I have been lucky enough to interview incredible entrepreneurs, world changers, New York Times best-selling authors, all people that I would have never thought, like, how on earth would I ever have a conversation with those people? And today is no different, you guys. Today, my guest falls into that category, my friends. I am interviewing Dave Hollis. He's got a new book coming out called Built Through Courage, and we had a lovely conversation about his own personal growth and development and got into all that mindset stuff that happens to all of us when you go from employee to entrepreneur, right? It resonated with me so much. And I know that you spa owners out there, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, because there is this security and stability and all of that. Like when you're an employee, right? When you jump into the world of entrepreneurship, it's like, wow, it's a whole different level of pressure and commitment and all these things. So when Dave was sharing his own experience, it was just like, yep, I get it. And I'm so glad that someone at your level is going or has gone through those things as well. So for those of you that may not know who Dave is, you're in for a treat. Let me do a quick read of his bio and then we'll jump right into that interview. So Dave Hollis is a New York Times bestselling author, host of the Rise Together podcast, a keynote speaker, and life and business coach on GrowthDay. Dave's history includes CEO of a media startup, former president of sales for the film studio at the Walt Disney Company, a talent manager across film, TV, music, and work in publicity, research, and technology in the entertainment sector. Dave's the father to 4 kids, a 4-time foster parent, an avid runner, a sports memorabilia enthusiast, and drives a 1969 Ford Bronco. Dave's philanthropy exists via the Hollis Foundation, where acting as an ally to the needs of children in foster care, teen homelessness, and food insecurity have been the recent focus for grants. Dave has sat on the board of the membership committee for the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences, of which he is a member, and on the boards of Fandango Labs, Will Rogers Motion Picture Pioneers, National Angels, and his alma mater, Pepperdine's Institute for Entertainment, Media, and Culture. So there you go. He's obviously quite accomplished individual, yet as you'll see in the interview, he's incredibly down to earth and super easy to connect with. I hope you enjoy this interview. Want to make sure you go out and grab his book, Built Through Courage. I pre-ordered it, super excited, read the first chapter, loved it, and I know you will too. All right, let's go ahead and play that interview. All right, Dave, so excited to have you on the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. This is such an honor.
Oh, Daniela, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so your book, Built Through Courage, when I saw that come up, the title for me, it really just hit me like, I don't know, it was just, I saw it and I was like, oh my God, that is everything. Because as someone personally who has been through a lot of, I don't know if I want to identify them as struggles or hardships, because I do now look at them as the greatest gifts, but you know, I've lost a parent, I've lost a baby, I've been through a divorce, like all these different things. And those truly are our greatest opportunities for growth. And you really just got the perfect name of building yourself, building your business, building whatever through the courage that it takes to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
So For you, I'm curious, like, has this been a lifelong philosophy for you that you were aware of, or was it in your most recent struggle that you really did this deep dive and were like, wow, I need to figure out who I am. I need to figure out, like, were you aware of that, or was that something that came out recently?
I think it's more something that's happened as a part of my regular life in the last 5 years, where for most of my life, I would identify more as being fixed mindset rather than growth mindset. I leaned a lot more on natural talent than pushing myself into new spaces. As much as I had a career for my first 20 years in more conventional conglomerate entertainment type opportunities, I did end up going into new jobs with a decent amount of frequency, but I tended to play in spaces and areas where I knew I had strengths and didn't necessarily allow myself to be overly exposed in things that I couldn't already do well. And
kind of knowing that you're going to win.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I know I'm going to keep my thumb on the scale a little bit here, make it, something that maybe challenges me, but not too much that I could fail too publicly or feel too badly about myself for not having gotten it right the first time. And when I was at that threshold between 30 and 40, the bigger existential questions of why am I here? Why am I not in a position to need to use all the things that I've been given in gifts to do well in this job that, man, I had this great job at Disney, but I just wasn't in this space where I felt like I was connected to purpose and definitely not using all of what I'd been given on an every single day basis in a way that made some of the achievement feel a little shallow. It didn't feel as meaningful or as fulfilling. And so I started making decisions to push myself into spaces that would intentionally make me uncomfortable for the opportunity to grow around that time. Mm-hmm. And that was an act of courage. And every time I ended up jumping into something new or writing my first book or hosting a podcast or coaching for the first time, doing anything that was me transitioning from being someone who worked on a business to being the business in some respects, it was an act of courage, deciding to cast a new vision for my life in the aftermath of a divorce where my primary identity had been husband. And now I was trying to figure out who am I now that I'm no longer who I've been. There's an act of courage that's required in standing back up and cultivating the imagination to actually see a vision for whatever that future might end up being. Because in the absence of courage, you can stay down. You can stay on the side of the road that you've fallen off of, and it just is a decision that you have to make. Not an easy decision. And like you, I can acknowledge now, so many of the things in the last 5 years that I didn't necessarily enjoy in the muscle being broken down or the headwinds that I was facing, I don't want to necessarily have to experience again, but I have wild gratitude for them having happened because I am who I am today and proud of who I am today, not in spite of the things I've gone through, but because of those things.
100%. I find it really interesting, that jump between being an employee and being an entrepreneur. And I've often, for my own, I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur, I say, because I jumped into this world. My husband's military, and we have moved more times than I can count. And so you kind of have to, if you want career longevity, you kind of have to create a career for yourself, so you're not restarting every 18 months. And apart from being a mom, entrepreneurship for me has been the greatest lesson in personal development, because you are just pushing you're always out of your comfort zone. So what was it like for you going from this safe, secure, stable, predictable employee relationship, right? Where that kind of can become your identity in a way. You said my identity was as a husband or father, but also like our work, what we do becomes kind of how, if we envision ourselves as successful or whatnot. And then you go into entrepreneurship and it's all on you, right? I mean, you have your team, but if you're the face or the head of the company, it's really challenging. I know a lot of spa owners go through that, starting as employees, moving into being the solo esthetician or the spa owner, and especially with the pandemic and all these things that are going on, what was that whole experience like for you?
It was so jarring. I mean, just the rug pull of rug pulls in something that had previously been really comfortable, too comfortable, and ultimately something that was overwhelming. So I had been, for the last 7 years of my 17-year career at Disney, the head of sales. And so as a person who had given a lot of weight to what the title president of distribution might mean, or what a salary might mean, or the access might mean, having found a way through hard work and a bunch of luck to get to have some of those things, they did in fact become a big part of who I was and how I identified myself. But when I made that jump, that change, if I made a mistake, and I made plenty, but the biggest mistake I made was thinking that the things that worked inside of that corporate environment could be plugged into the entrepreneur environment that I was moving into, and that they would work, that because I'd been a leader of teams in 72 countries, thousands of people, that I could lead in something of a similar way in a now small business with just a handful of people. And what I realized more than anything is, one, I had a team of subject matter experts that had seen all of the problems that tended to happen in a pretty traditional business. Their ability to smell smoke way before there was actual fire had them putting out the smolder before it even turned into real flame. And here in this entrepreneur world that we were in, with just the handful of us that were trying to do new things all the time, there wasn't any history for the kind of problems that might come up. There wasn't a depth of expertise, taking nothing away from any of us, but none of us had ever walked in that part of the forest before. So we didn't know where there was a cliff or where there was a slippery terrain or whatever it might be. And I can remember at the very beginning, I really took personally the frequency with which we were experiencing problems, because I'd come out of an environment where I, for the most part, as the leader of this big organization, was being told of problems that were stopped before they'd happened, and now was experiencing problems 4 and 5 times a day. And the frequency with which problems were happening made me wonder if I, in fact, had what it took to lead this business. Like, why wasn't I able to preemptively put those fires out? Why couldn't I smell smoke? And I ended up. How do you
get over that, though? How do you have the confidence in yourself, or know that this is the right purpose? I know in the book you talk a lot about finding your why and being, using that as a driver forward, but it's hard when you're every day like, am I cut out for this?
Yeah. In the book, I tell the story of how important perspective from people who have already walked in your shoes ends up being. And we had an opportunity early on, maybe 6 months into the building, the scaling of the company, where I was feeling super overwhelmed by the frequency of problems. We were backstage with John Maxwell, who's got every leadership book ever written of his is amazing. And he's got so much experience. And we're sharing this like conundrum of like, why do we have so many problems? Is it me as the leader? Like, what is the deal? And he, in this like very calm and very confident way, said, look, you can either be a small business owner, or you can have multiple days in a row without problems, but you can't have both. Right. And so there was something in just like this permission to accept that this was the price of entry that normalized that, oh, I actually had a completely different experience in a completely different environment, because that's the way things work when you're an executive at the biggest media company on the planet. Right. And now I'm having a different experience in a different environment, because that's the kind of experience you have when you are running a small business as an entrepreneur who's trying to scale in spaces where you've never done the work before. You're supposed to have a bunch of problems, because those problems every single time ended up drawing our attention to a process, to a way that we could change the product to better serve customer needs. Right. Yeah. Refining. And so when we could accept, oh, this is the price of entry. Things are going to happen in a small business. That's just what happens when you're running one. And 2, reframing the way that those failures, those mistakes were actually giving us all of the answers that we needed for what would next be the best thing to help build our business, we could see it in a way that wasn't an indictment on us or me specifically. I just talked for myself. I didn't see it any longer as an indictment on me as maybe not being the best leader. It did definitely mean I had to lead in a different way. I came into entrepreneurship thinking that I could, in the way that I had let people have a little more autonomy to run with a lot more rope, there wasn't an ability to do that in a way that wouldn't compromise small problems becoming big problems if I didn't myself get my hands dirty and get into the mix in a way that had me really connected to and involved in problem solving when those problems were happening in real time. And so it's just a different game, different playbook. I had to operate off of a completely different playbook. And that was something I didn't appreciate at the beginning, which is part of what made it so jarring when I started.
So one of the struggles that I'm hearing from small business owners quite a bit is I just can't find good people, or people don't want to work. And for me, that is a question of drive. And drive is something that I talk about a lot. I try and understand what it is. And in the book, you told this story of when you bought a plane ticket to go to the Super Bowl. And, initially your boss said, no, you can't go. It's not in the budget. And you went and bought your own ticket and they let you go. And you kind of described that as the confidence of youth, right? But to me, when I read that, I was like, oh man, he's got drive. And that action, that like you being an action taker and saying, no, this is what I want. It, in a way, I mean, from my understanding of reading that chapter in the book, was really kind of started a domino effect for all these other things that happened in your career. So to bring it back to the point of drive, do you feel like that's something you were born with? Do you feel like that's something you can teach? How do you, or do you just think that is like the confidence of youth in an action like that?
Oh, it's so many layers. So I think in a crazy way, not to get too deep into a conversation I'll have with my therapist again on Friday, my wiring as a kid was connected very much to achievement, making me lovable. I think there are a lot of people that might relate with this idea that if you can achieve a certain number of things, then, but maybe only after you've achieved them, do you feel like you are enough or worthy or lovable, the people that you love or crave love from, that somehow there is conditionality to if you can achieve, then you will be worthy. Even if every person in your life unconditionally loves you, for me, that was a part of my story growing up. I felt like if I can get good grades and get trophies in sports and show up to youth group as many times as possible with all the Bible verses memorized, then I would be good. And that thing was a through line then into how, when I got into any professional environment, rather than accepting anyone else telling me what they believed to be the limits were for my career growth, or the speed with which I could be promoted, or the access I could have to, in the example of your story, Fox, where I was working at the time, is broadcasting the Super Bowl. I ask if I can go and help. They say they don't have a budget. And I take the thing that they've suggested is the barrier to entry and eliminate it by committing to eating a lot more top ramen as a poor 23-year-old and show up, and they give me a job. And that signal to them truly ended up becoming this opportunity starter, where they were like, gosh, this guy, he heard no, and he turned a no into a yes by eliminating the issue that was presented to him. And I was ultimately then offered another opportunity and another after that. Some of that, I think, is just ingrained in a human. If you're sitting in an interview, I don't know how you're going to suss out whether someone has drive or not, unless as you're asking questions in the interview, you're able to have them storytell a little bit around how they had some ingenuity around engineering opportunity for themselves that went beyond the scope of their responsibility. Because if I think about what, Dave, would you describe is your personal brand from your corporate journey from assistant to president, it was manufacturing opportunities, raising my hand, and ultimately saying yes. I said yes to so many opportunities that in asking colleagues that I was peers with or had as mentors, to a person, they would have said, you should not take this opportunity. It's not the right thing. It doesn't have the best path. But because of who was asking, oftentimes when I said yes, I became seen as a person who could be given the chance to step into something that maybe I wasn't even prepared for experience-wise, but that because of that willingness previously to step in, learn something new, MacGyver, duct tape fishing line my way into solving a problem that someone else wasn't necessarily interested in. It just had me at the top of a list for, all right, we got another problem in the business. Who can we turn it on? Oh, well, Dave's done it twice now in the last 2 years. Let's throw it his way. But I think that ends up being, again, like, I don't know that that's a quality that shows up on a resume so much as it might be a part of a series of questions that you ask to see what kind of storytelling someone comes up with for how they have themselves been a creative problem solver or found ways to think of things that would solve something that was plaguing the business or competitively creating challenges that were unconventional relative to what other people in the business might have been thinking of solutions wise.
So that's a great answer. I know it's such a question that I ask so many different people and talk about with my husband, is just really understanding, like, because I want to teach my kids, right? You know, it's a hard thing to teach integrity or teach drive in a way that's healthy. In wrapping up, you know, this episode is going to be released right before the book comes out, which I'm super excited about, by the way. But right now, at the time of recording this, you've got a whole Facebook group going with people that have pre-ordered the book, and you're doing weekly coaching, teaching in there. Tell me a little bit about, like, what your vision, what your outcome is, the impact that you want to make with this book, and who this book is for.
Well, that is a very tricky question, because I have made the mistake previously in having written a book in the shadow of my then wife's unicorn black swan event book, where I made the dangerous step of comparing how I might be received or how many books I might sell relative to hers. And it really ended up coming back to, if this book, and this is such a, like, it feels like a canned saying, but if this book ends up truly affecting transformation and breakthrough for a single person, it will have been worth writing. Right. So, like, I can't think about, like, how big. I can think about world change, and world change would in and of itself exist if just one family had a different way of thinking about reaching for the way that they were put on this planet and how they could unlock that purpose, if it were just to affect that one person. But when you think about the way that I've approached the launch, this is in a business kind of a setting, in a Gary V-ish kind of way, jab, 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 right hook. Like, I know that there are so many great things inside of this book. I also happen to be super biased in having written it, in believing that. But I want to convince people to trust me with their hard-earned money. And part of how I am hoping to say, hey, spend $15 or $20 with me, is by, in that value exchange, trying to offer them $500 worth of value in a community with 13 weeks of coaching, with a Finding Your Why course, with a mindset and resilience course, so that even if you're not a reader, even if you don't end up having the kind of transformation or breakthrough that I'd hope for in the book, I still think you will, that there will be something in community, in coaching, in these courses that absolutely would be worth your money. And so as a small business owner, I would just think, as you're trying to engage someone, is there something that you could do that might over deliver the promise or the intention that you were hoping for in a lifetime customer, in the on-ramp of getting them to become one? And so I have just tried to create a community that is filled with love and encouragement and accountability and the kind of things that you need when you're attempting to have courage as a part of the currency that allows you to step closer each day to this reason why you've been put on the planet. The through line of the book, like the conceit of the book, is you were created with very deliberate, very intentional purpose in mind, and that the work that we have as people in our life is to cultivate the courage to step closer every day to honoring the intention of that creator. And sometimes listening to our intuition or trusting our knowing or the voice of God or whatever it is that's inside of your gut that is telling us, begging you to please trust that this thing that you know, this version of who you know you can be or should be, is the person that you need to be, even if it ends up being a little uncomfortable because of it challenging who you've historically been, even if it, to someone in your circle, makes them scratch their head as to why you're doing this thing that makes sense to you, but not to them. When I left the president of distribution at the Walt Disney Company to become an entrepreneur for my wife's business, that at the time we made this choice, Grow Wash Your Face had not come out. The business did not actually produce money. The people that I was telling, hey, I'm going to leave this job with all the security and the guarantee of working on Marvel, Pixar, Lucas, and Disney for the rest of time. I'm leaving this to go do this. I'm going to leave my career to pursue my calling. It didn't make sense to anyone, but that intuition, that knowing, that voice from God saying like, Dave, pay attention, brother. You are here for very specific purpose. And your work is to honor that intention. Please honor it. Let the legacy of your life be you honoring the intention for why you've been placed on this planet. I had to do something that was unconventional and super jarring to the conversation we had, in that all of the growth that has happened in these last handful of years were because of having made choices to leave what I knew for the things I needed, to leave comfort for growth. And whoever's listening to this, I don't even remember what the stinking question was, but whoever's listening to this, right? Like, if you've got something kind of beating in your heart, that voice that is just like started as a whisper, but is becoming a louder and louder conversation until it becomes a scream, you pay attention to it, because that voice often already knows the things that you need and is trying to draw you into a space to fully actualize why you're here, to allow you to bring all of your gifts to bear.
You just have to have the courage to listen to it.
You just have to have the courage to listen to it.
So that was beautiful. Thank you. And it's actually been really beautiful to watch your journey over the past few years. Tell everyone, where is the best place to get the book?
Well, you can get the book literally wherever books are sold. So if you've got a favorite place, favorite local bookstore, you like to buy things on Amazon, you want to hear me read it to you on Audible, buy it wherever you traditionally buy books from. But when you do, head over to mrdavehollis.com/book and drop in the fact that you bought the book. And I will immediately send you goodies that will make the value of the book wildly greater. And we'll invite you to come spend some time in a community. There's like 6,500 people in this community, and they are every single day just encouraging each other. And if someone's had a hard day, helping them get back up. If someone's had a win, we're celebrating that person's win.
It's a love fest.
It's a love fest.
I've been seeing all the positivity come through my feed.
It is so great. It's like a positivity waterfall, but then also every week we're getting together and having a conversation about something. And when you pre-order the book, you get access to all the coaching that's existed for all of the 13 weeks leading to the release. And I'd love you to have access to that.
Perfect. We'll get all of that linked up below. Dave, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate, you pouring your soul into this work. I think you've already accomplished your goal of impacting at least one person. And I encourage every single one of you to check that out.
Thank you, Daniela. I really appreciate you having me today. Thank you, listener. Go leave that harbor. If you are feeling called in any way to do something great, have the courage to do it.